This is a discussion by and for online English teachers and coaches,
We're talking about the ups and downs of teaching online,
of entrepreneurship,
our students,
and our experiences
and yours.
in the digital teaching landscape. I'm Paul.
I'm Andrea.
Grab a coffee.
Let's start the staff meeting podcast. I'm a little in that moment where, you know, you're recording something and you're trying to be as natural and authentic as possible. So hopefully we'll forget that this is recording soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's the issue of all performance, isn't it? It's that self-consciousness. You know, people are watching, you know, you're being recorded, and suddenly you adjust your behavior and your
it's
and
amazing
your voice and your delivery.
Yes. I know, it's so funny.
And isn't it the work of all actors to get rid of that?
I guess not too. I would think that actors would probably not say they're getting rid of it, but working with it, or just using your tool of what you have and then just working through it and trying to, you know, interpret whatever the character is or the script is, but using yourself, finding ways to use whatever you're feeling. I think. I mean, I'm not an actor, but having been in the theater for so long.
It's probably more of a challenge for film actors because the camera and the crew are in your face, and there's all this technology reminding you that this is an artificial endeavor. On stage with the lights facing you, you probably don't even see the audience very clearly. It's just you're seeing light at you. So it's probably easier to forget that dimension.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is our first podcast.
I know.
The staff meeting.
Well, we've been having the staff meeting every week since COVID, I guess.
That's right. Why don't we share a little bit about that story, how this came to be, how our staff meeting came to be.
Our beloved
staff meeting. Our beloved staff meeting, and how what we see about it, what we foresee it being now.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about the background?
Well, let's see. What is it? 10 years ago, 2014, I started at our school that we were teaching at in person way back in 2014. And we had a wonderful, I guess we'll call her boss, who is now a friend, our academic director, Cindy, who implemented our staff meetings. And we had the best teachers and colleagues that anyone could ask for, especially for me as a new teacher 10 years ago. So supportive, so, funny, affable, just lovely people to be around. And at our staff meetings, as you know, it was something we all looked forward to. And we had so much material and ideas and support from each other. So when COVID happened and the school shut down and you and I jumped online and started our businesses, we continued because we like lamented those meetings. We missed them so much. We decided to continue the staff meetings on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. Is that how you remember it?
Absolutely. I remember that in those staff meetings at our language school, because we spent so much time, we were given a lot of creative latitude and autonomy to run our classrooms. And we worked in individual classrooms. We had dedicated rooms that were ours. So we spent most of our day there. And despite the presence of students, it was easy to feel isolated. It was easy to feel like you're on your own. And both you and I started as new teachers. Before coming there, neither of us had taught. So I often felt quite alone, which on the one hand, I liked that autonomy and creative freedom to just run our classes the way we saw fit.
Yeah.
Without, surveillance by some overbearing boss. Our boss observed us periodically, but not in an overbearing way. And I like that. On the other hand, it also led to sometimes feeling isolated. However, when we gathered for staff meetings, the camaraderie just exploded because I realized everyone else is also feeling
Yeah.
Even if they're not aware of it, they were feeling that kind of classroom isolation. And we'd get together and talk about students. We'd talk about our teaching. We would talk about our materials, our curriculum, our school as a business. Oftentimes we'd bring up topics that didn't seem related, like books we had been reading and, self-help concepts we've been reading about. And you're right, the camaraderie and that sense of team and support for a field of work that's largely independent and autonomous was incredibly important.
Oh, yeah.
And when COVID hit and we decided to make a living online, we saw opportunities there and we're ready for that change. That sense of isolation of being in a classroom alone was suddenly magnified 100x in the word of the marketing jargon.
Yeah.
10x. And we were physically isolated in our homes initially and professionally isolated. And you and I both had chats and realized, that could be hazardous.
Oh, yeah. And we talked about, we had days and where we thought, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Creating curriculums and materials and not getting any feedback on it and just having to just do it on your own, which is totally doable. But I realized as a teacher myself, I need that collaboration. I need to bounce ideas off people. I need to complain about how lonely it is and how hard it is, because when you're an online teacher, you're not just a teacher.
That's right.
You're a marketer. You're a video editor.
Yeah.
You're a copywriter.
A lot of new skills to learn.
So many.
Right. And we would get together in our weekly staff meeting online on Zoom initially. Well, still. And bounce those ideas. Hey, what have you learned this week about marketing?
Yeah.
Hey, what websites have you discovered? Sharing what we were discovering in this new world of online teaching together, and collaborating, and also commiserating when we were feeling discouraged, which was often.
Thank God for those meetings. Oh, it's still often. So that's why we decided to do this, because we thought there must be other teachers out there who need this, need to know that they're not alone.
So our idea for this podcast now is to take our weekly private staff meetings and expand them to other online teachers. I'm starting to realize it could be online English teachers like us. It could be online physics teachers.
Yeah.
There might be, I don't know who's out there doing this, but I think what we've learned is that whoever is out there doing online education, you're going to feel alone sometimes, and you're going to need to learn skills and discover tools that you're not aware of yet. So we thought this would be a great way to collaborate, share what we've discovered, share our experiences with it, and hopefully learn from others.
Yes. Maybe we'll have guests.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
We also plan to go live with this, maybe after a couple of weeks of testing.
Yeah.
In which case, even if someone's not on the Zoom with us, they can, offer comments in the comment thread.
Right.
But,
and that's the thing too. We're going to figure it out as we go along, which is what we've been doing individually, just figuring it all out, stumbling and picking ourselves back up again. And
in the course of that COVID experience, that shift to working online, even after the COVID restrictions lifted, which in Canada, didn't take that long. They were lifted eventually and comfortably. And for the most part, very soon after the initial lockdowns, we were able to go out and do stuff as long as we followed some protocols. So but during that time, where was I going with that? Gosh. Yeah, during that time, we realized that to do this business and learn these things, we would need help. And there were entrepreneurs, businesses, coaches, gurus out there offering that kind of help. And to find it was kind of piecemeal, right? You were finding someone online. I was finding someone online. We met some other online teachers. We joined some programs and courses. And it's all so many threads. You know, you take a marketing course, you take a business course, you take an online teacher entrepreneur course. And eventually you also realize that the help is out there, but it can be very expensive.
Yeah. There's an investment of money and time. And so that time translates into consistency. And that, for me, is the number one challenge. So the money and the time and the consistency is so crucial to the whole thing working.
Yeah. I mean,
in terms of marketing.
Yeah. The fact is, when you're alone in your room working from home, you have to market. And the way to market is with social media. So that's a whole other field. That people go to university to study for.
Yes.
And we've had to learn it very quickly so that we could market ourselves. And you're right. Mm-hmm. It requires an enormous time investment. And all the people that are in social media will tell you have to be consistent in order for the algorithms of social media to start promoting you. But I've always had a problem with that word because I've tried to be consistent. Mm-hmm. I think the real word is constant.
Yeah. What is the difference between consistent and constant?
I've tried to be consistent by having a live stream once a week.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not constant enough.
You're right. Yeah.
Frequent enough to really trigger those algorithms, especially on apps like TikTok, which favor frequency. So not only do you have to be consistent and regular, you have to put a lot.
Yeah.
One friend that I met online, and I share another podcast with, his name is Philip. He's done really well with this kind of system. And he's devoted a lot of time to putting content on LinkedIn specifically, constantly.
So does he dedicate like a Sunday to creating all the content and then he drips it out throughout the week?
I think that's what he does, because he does have private clients and a course and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's what he does. But let's get him on the show at some point.
Yeah. Because that's another thing, is organized time management is another huge thing. It's completely different to the classroom experience where you'd prep and, you had a routine of getting to school early, prepping, going to the classroom, marking, all that. And everything was done for you. The students were there in the classroom. It was full. There was sales and marketing. Yeah. So this time management and going, you have a class coming up on Thursday, like, oh, right, but I need to get students next week. So that means I have to do my marketing, and then everything becomes a backtrack. What is that method in the military where you have, in order to achieve a goal, you have to see the end, but you have to go back to the backtrack and see the steps as you go back to the beginning. Yeah.
Climbing Mount Everest, you start with the goal of reaching the summit, but then you have to work back in steps, the length of which are determined by how much oxygen you can expend in a day.
Right. Yeah.
The distance that your daily steps will be, your daily progress, the equipment you'll need at each phase, the changes in equipment, altitude increases. And finally, you work back to the first step, which would be like booking the flight.
Yes.
To Nepal on a certain day.
And that's the step that takes the guts and the longest, that first step, like, I'm going to do this.
So it's a good strategy for achieving any goal, is breaking it up into manageable steps that you can identify and you can assess and you can plan for. And so, we would talk about those kind of things, right? Like, what do we want to do? We want to do an online course or have a full schedule of paying clients, students. Well, how do you get that?
Yeah.
You've got to start thinking about the things that are involved to get to all those steps.
and staying motivated. I mean, we're throwing all kinds of stuff. It's the first podcast, but it's just getting it all out. Staying motivated. I mean, we're teachers, but then you spend all this time on creating reels on Instagram or doing all this marketing. And then you're like, oh, right, I haven't actually taught a class yet. Or so then that's when you go down the rabbit hole of what am I doing? How is this ever going to work? I'm one of millions of online teachers. What makes me so great? Oh, and the times that we've spoken about that and dug each other out of those graves. Like, we've had to really give each other support and remind each other of our, our uniqueness, our skills, what we bring, our individuality, which counts, which is a huge part of the whole thing. So
I found in terms of motivation, I remember working at a school, like any business, there's a lot of different motivations in play that we no longer have. For example, you have an obligation to the company who pays you to show up. That's one.
Yeah.
You have a very rigid schedule. Classes start at 9, got to be ready by 9. You may be structured by the bus schedule if you're a commuter. So you follow into a daily routine that kind of takes care of itself. Like, motivation's not an issue. You got to get up and go. So even if you have a morning where you're not feeling into it, or tired, hungover, sick, whatever be the case, you got to go do it. And the students are waiting for you, right? And based on yesterday's work, what they need today. So the motivation was sort of a foregone conclusion. It's sort of taken care of by your professionalism. Show up and do your job as best you can, right?
Yeah. How we've always worked.
Take that structure away, and you're left with, hey, you're on your own. You don't even have to wake up if you don't want to.
That is the danger zone of entrepreneurship.
Now that's an extreme.
But no.
I'd rather just maybe do the dishes and make something yummy from
the times I've done the dishes and cleaned the house and, justified that with, I'm doing something productive. And this is important to keep a clean house. The things I've done to avoid, it's pretty funny, but not for long. That's another thing. Yeah. So maybe we can, people listening to this are probably identifying with everything that we're saying. So another goal for us would be to learn about ways we can avoid rabbit holes and procrastination, and specifically for us.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier about the different things we have to do as online English teachers. You have to be a teacher when the time comes. But before and after that, you have to be a marketer. You've got to be a technologist with cameras and microphones.
Yeah.
And those are, the idiom wearing different hats doesn't really do justice to the cognitive switching that you're doing throughout the day.
Yeah.
Right? At a school, when we arrived, we were teachers and nothing but all day long.
Yeah. I mean, you change something in your pricing or something you offer in your course, that means you have to go to your website, make that small little edit. Oh, but lo and behold, something happens where you have to figure out the mistake you made. So then you go to help and you're on there for an hour. I mean, one small task can turn into 2 hours. And that's where the mindset comes in, the patience. I find that I feel like I rush a lot because I feel like I got to get it done because I'm so used to working for my entire life, working out there in corporate world or even at the school, any administrative type of job. I always felt like I had to be efficient and get it done and, be a multitasker, right? Which I've now learned is not an efficient way to be. it sounds like you can wear many hats. I used to put that in my resume. I can wear many hats. I'm a multitasker. But boy, oh boy, that only makes you the type of person that, I don't know, or the type of worker that um, relies on perfectionism. And then that turns into a lack of confidence and rushing through things, and they're not perfect. Anyway, yeah.
Maintaining productivity is a challenge because there's so many different things to do all the time. Like, just take a day, one day, and count the number of websites and platforms you have subscriptions or memberships to. I currently have 5 different Google email addresses and accounts. I'm spread out over so many different things.
Yeah.
And people are communicating me on WhatsApp, Messenger, email, all these different things.
Yeah.
And keeping track of all that has been a nightmare. And yet it's sort of unavoidable because different people and different clients use different things. So you've got to kind of work with those clients and meet them where they are. Whereas if you were at a language school, the clients meet you in one place, the lobby of your school.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think we're making this sound like a nightmare, and no one's going to want to continue doing it.
Well, it begs the question, why do it?
Yeah, why do it?
Now's the time where I want to ask you, for the benefit of those listening, who are you? How did you become an English teacher? And more to the point here, why do you do this? Why have you stayed with online English teaching? So tell us a little bit about who you are and why you do this crazy things, because it does sound overwhelmingly daunting.
It does. Well, So I've been in the theater world for over 20 years as a stage manager and a director. And I also worked in the corporate world as an administrative specialist in different roles. And then in 2014, I decided that I was just feeling compelled to change things up. And I always, after graduating from university, thought about becoming a teacher. So I quit my job and I went to VCC, Vancouver Community College, and enrolled in the TESOL or TEFL. There's so many acronyms. The course that to become an English language teacher or an ESL teacher. However, since doing my master's degree, I've realized and learned that ESL is not the correct acronym to use anymore. EAL is what we should be using. English is an additional language. Anyway, so I started teaching at ELS where we were, and day one, I stood in front of the classroom and this overwhelming feeling came over me. And I was like, oh my God, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what people talk about when they say, do your passion or do, whatever the people say. But I felt that feeling. And then over the years, I became involved in different initiatives at the school and went on, did some speaking and some workshops related to English through drama. And I became very interested in teaching English through the lens of theater. And then I did my master's degree, and my entire focus was on that. And then COVID hit, and I decided to become an entrepreneur online, a teacherpreneur, as they say, and continue this passion I have for doing English. And so now I focus on teaching English to international actors. And have started my business called my business is The Joy of English. And I have a department, if you will, called Studio Joe. So Joy of English Joe, where I focus on the international actor. And why do I continue doing it? Because it is incredibly challenging, but what keeps me going is that it's my own thing. And I know that I have a platform that people enjoy, or I mean, I don't know how to say this. I feel like the students I work with really enjoy my method, the support I give, and that spurs me on because of what what I get from my students, what I learn from my students. It never stops, that symbiotic kind of relationship that you have with your students. So that's inspiring to me. And it's my own thing. I love running my own business, and that keeps you going. I mean, of course you have terrible days, but it's the autonomy and the independence of not relying on a school or whatever to keep you employed. It's really up to you. And there's a certain empowerment or empowered feeling in that.
Mm-hmm. I think especially that from a sort of economic perspective, I think we learned from the COVID experience that it could be very, very dangerous to depend on an employer. Like our business was decimated when the restrictions prevented students from coming to Canada and studying. Schools closed down, some permanently. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty clear that even though our school was making a valiant effort to stay afloat, it barely did so. And I honestly didn't trust it to survive.
Yeah. And we teach people worldwide. So, I mean, they were not in the brick and mortar anymore. They were out there. So they're still there.
There's still some are coming back to those schools, but I think the pandemic reliance on Zoom, for example, opened new doors. And, established new territory for education. Yeah. So being an entrepreneur, although it has ups and downs and challenges, you putting yourself in a position to survive things like a pandemic as a business, as a worker. I like that idea a lot, because the idea of like, oh, I'm employed by this company, and by the way, they're closing down, and I'm just out of luck. Yeah. I don't like that at all. Yeah. If you lose some students, you can keep going and continue marketing because you've learned all these skills to be able to do that. And in the process, you could actually make money doing any number of those skills. You could transition and become a social media marketer now. Absolutely. Or a video editor. Yeah. So the diverse skills you've adopted can be parlayed into other work should the need arise, right? Yeah. So what about you? Oh, sorry. But you got to introduce yourself too. Similar to you, I spent 20, 25 years in a completely different field in the security industry. And, as a young man, I thought, oh, that's super cool, right? I had a private investigator license. I was able to do all this cool stuff. But as I moved into my 30s, I realized there's nothing cool about working 7 days a week, sometimes 30-hour shifts. There's nothing cool about the stress involved in, working to ensure someone else's safety at your expense. There's nothing cool about having no life and no friends and, no relationships. So the novelty wore off on me. Plus, I always felt a little bit out of place there. When I was a kid, I was an artistic, creative child. And for a lot of complicated reasons, all of that kind of got squashed into the floor, and I gave up on even thinking of myself that way. And so I was in this business and didn't know what to do. I knew I wanted to get out, knew I wanted to change. And fortuitously, one night I treated myself to dinner. I went downtown Vancouver to dine at a Japanese restaurant. And there was only one seat available at a dining bar in a Japanese restaurant. I took the seat, ordered a beer, started looking at the menu. The beer came, and the woman next to me, young Japanese woman, reached over, took my beer, and started drinking it.
Oh.
And this is my career, but this is also how it started.
Okay.
I was surprised. I turned to her and just kind of like, what's going on here? And she was with two friends, and her two friends started apologizing profusely for their drunken friend's rude behavior and stealing my beer. I thought, there's no harm done. It's cool. I'll get another beer. They offered to buy another beer. Sure, that's lovely. But that broke the ice.
Right.
And I started chatting with these three young ladies who, it turns out, were English students in Vancouver. And we started chatting, and I said, so, it was like a Thursday night, a weeknight. I said, so, do you get lots of homework in that business? And they said, yeah, but we don't have any homework tonight. We're just going to go out. And they told me that they were going down to Gastown, which is an older area in Vancouver. It's, can be a little seedy. And they said, we're going to our classmate's birthday party at a pub down there, the town pump. But we heard it's a really dangerous neighborhood. So they asked me, completely oblivious, I hadn't talked about my profession. They asked me to walk them down as their bodyguard. And I thought, well, that's cute. Sure, I'll walk you down to Gastown. And so we went down to Gastown, went to the town pub. They invited me in to buy me a beer for my troubles. And almost immediately, the one who had stolen my beer started getting really ill. So one of the girls took her to the washroom to take care of that.
Jeez.
Leaving me alone with a woman named Yuka.
Ah, that sounds familiar.
Her English was pretty good, so we had a nice conversation, and we exchanged emails, started dating. And while we dated, sometimes I would help her with her English homework. Mm-hmm. And found that I really found it interesting. As a child, English was my best subject in school. I had some kind of natural knack for it. I had always written. I was a voracious reader my whole life, including when I was in the security business. And I found that I had some knack for explaining English to my then girlfriend. And we decided to make a go of our relationship. After her visa expired, we decided to think about marriage. And when we started thinking like that, we had to decide, should we live in Japan, where she's from, or live in Canada? If we go to Japan, which is a very safe country, they don't need security people. So what could I do if we lived in Japan? And Yuka said, why don't you become an English teacher? You help me with my homework so well. So I thought, that sounds cool. Spending your days talking about English. Great. And at that time, Vancouver was full of these language schools. Mm-hmm. And walking around the city, you could see them everywhere in office suites, ground floor suites. They were very intriguing. So I started inquiring at a couple of them how to become an English teacher. And they told me, well, you need a teaching certificate, TESOL certificate, and a university degree. And I had none of that. I had never gone to university. So in talking about this with my girlfriend and fiance by that time, we decided, okay, well, go to university. So at the age of 40, I went to university. I went to UBC, and I spent 4 years there studying. And I didn't study education. I studied language. They have a program there. It's called Applied Linguistics and Cognitive Linguistics. I took those, thinking that I wasn't sure what business I would go into, maybe academics. I just wanted to keep all my options open. So I started building what they call an interdisciplinary studies program, where you kind of piece together a degree based on all the interests you have. And at 40 years old, I had a lot of interests, including things not related to English teaching, like cinema, literature. So I thought, well, I'm going to go to university and just study all the stuff I like and then figure it out. So I did that. And after 4 years, I thought, well, how do I make money at this? I was pretty eager to get to work, by which time I had a wife. So we were building our life together. And by the way, it was Yuka that I met at that dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized I needed something more specific to turn this knowledge into a job. So I looked into the TESOL programs, and UBC had a kind of applied linguistics program in exchange with a graduate school in Japan. So I went into that program and did that for a year and got TESOL certified. And we did a practicum there at a lovely private high school. However, when I came back to Canada and started shopping around for jobs, they told me that certificate didn't qualify me to work in Vancouver. I needed one which involved a practicum with adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I enrolled in a 1-month intensive program because I already had the academic and theoretical side of.
Where was that, at VCC? Oh, Greystone, right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I did the same at VCC. Yeah. The intensive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And by the end of it, I was certified and then started looking for a job. And that was an adventure. I don't know how long it took you to find a job at our language school. It took me 6 months.
Oh, it took me a day. I was lucky.
So I was handing out resumes. I emailed them. I went to the schools themselves. Over 100 resumes printed off and delivered. Nobody so much as called me back. And I was getting very discouraged. I thought, there's something on my resume. Maybe it's my age. Maybe it's my background in security, and everyone thinks I'm going to be some sinister goon.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what it was, but I got very discouraged. A friend of mine finally said, well, have you looked at Craigslist? I said, Craigslist? Isn't that where you buy like trafficked organs and children?
Right.
He said, no, they advertise jobs. So I looked on there, and there was a phone number for an ESL teacher job. I called it, and somebody answered, named Cindy, and she said, come on into an interview. And so I thought, this is my chance. I've got an interview. So I spent the whole weekend preparing, studying up on everything. So she was going to ask me any question I could have an answer. And I also heard that sometimes they ask you to do an audition lesson.
Right.
Okay, beginner, intermediate, advanced. I better prepare 3 lessons. So I mapped it out. I rehearsed. I was ready for anything. Monday morning came. I went to the school, ready, but exhausted and thinking, if this doesn't work out, I'm just going to go back to the security business. Cindy greeted me, ushered me into her office, sat down. She was very quiet at first. I don't want to say cold. I don't want to say cold, but she was very quiet at first. I sat down, and she looked over my resume and then slowly looked up at me and said, quite deadpan, she said, so Paul, what do you want? And I said, well, I want
this job.
I just want a chance to teach. I'll take care of the rest.
Right.
And she thought about it and said, okay, can you start on Friday?
Oh.
That was my interview. One question. One answer. No audition, nothing.
Wow.
And I'd have to ask her what she thought of that. But for me, I was just so tired of and discouraged. I couldn't help but just be simple and honest. I just want a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I could do it. I don't know how, but I knew I could do this job. So I just said, I just want a chance. I will take care of the rest. I'm not a person who lets people down, I hope. I have a very strong work ethic, so I knew I could do the job and I would be a good employee. I just needed that door open, and no one had given me so much as a time of day. So I started working that Friday. I was on the sub list initially, and I was told to expect that for a year. But within the month, after a few substitutions, I had a full calendar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I think, and then I think I showed up a month later after you, maybe,
Pretty soon. Yeah. I started in,
or no, a year later. Maybe it was a year later, because I think you'd already won the Teacher of the Year award when I started. I think it must have been a year. You're a year ahead of me.
I started in January 2013.
Yeah, I started in March 2014.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite a process, but
Mm.
I often tell that story, including the meeting my wife at the restaurant, for several reasons. One, it's an illustration that you can change your life drastically in the middle of it, your 40s, late 30s.
Yep.
And secondly, imagine if that drunken friend had never stolen my beer. The chances are very low that those three ladies and I would ever talk.
Yep.
They probably wouldn't have volunteered to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an introverted, shy, reserved, polite guy. I'm not going to start chatting with three strangers necessarily. We never would have talked, and I never would have met my future wife. So I use that story to tell students, hey, look, be open, right? Don't be afraid to talk to strangers, especially in an environment like a restaurant.
Yeah.
Right. If the person is capable of ordering a meal at a restaurant, you're probably not a psychopath or a homeless lunatic or whatever you're afraid of. And they're probably very interested in meeting you and chatting.
Well, that's actually a very good point in terms of when you say be open, because I think I've noticed, people in my life throughout the years avoid doing things because they're not qualified or they don't have the credentials. And I find that I did the same thing too. I was 47, I think. No, I can't. 42 when I got into teaching and didn't get my master's degree till I was 49. So drastically changing my life, completely different lifestyle, jumping into something that I'd never done before, but trusting that I'll figure it out. And relying on the kindness of others. Others want you to succeed, and which is kind of a mindset thing. Also, you tend to think that you're being judged, or people want you to, fail, but they want you to succeed, and that's a particularly strong attribute of our what do you call it? Our group of teachers at the school, our community at school was very supportive. And so that was great to be able to jump into something, have the guts to do it, but also have that support. I think it's so important to just do, and don't worry about don't think about how it's going to turn out, because you don't know. Just do your best. Absolutely. And collaborate and welcome the other. There's another thing too. I remember with Cindy, our wonderful boss. We had our evaluations every year, and she brought me into the office and she gave me some positive feedback, but also gave me some points to, some constructive criticism. And my response was to be positive. It hurts, right? When someone does that. Inside, I was like, oh my God. But on the outside, I was like, okay, thank you very much. That's actually really helpful. I'm going to really look at that. And maybe I wasn't believing that 100% when I said it, but by saying it, you believe it, because how else are you supposed to react to that kind of thing? It's hard for the person to tell you that. So I keep that in mind also, that this is hard for them. At the end of the day, a few hours later, Cindy caught me in the hallway and she said, I just wanted to say thank you for receiving that feedback so well. It made me feel so much more comfortable and better about it, because I was a little reluctant to tell you, but the way you took it was great. And that in turn made me feel really good and made me want to really look at that criticism and work on it. So that kind of collaborative relationship, that feeling uncomfortable, but working your way through it, not resisting it, but actually kind of trudging through the uncomfortableness was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
So you were able to get past the sting of the criticism when she sort of addressed it from above and said, that thing that we went through back there, it was hard for me too.
Yeah.
But it's necessary. And when that happens, you can learn
Yes.
you can look at the criticism more objectively past the sting of it and over your defensiveness about it and say, there's something there I need to address and grow from.
Yes. Because you can't grow without some kind of, you've got to have, what is that? You can't grow without some kind of conflict. You need to learn from something and kind of crack a little bit and then grow from there. So it was a huge revelation for me that I love to share with my students also, is to don't resist, work through it, and collaborate on, criticism. You don't just receive it. You can also continue a dialogue through it.
And it sounds too like it's a fascinating process to enter a new profession, entirely new profession in our middle age, which we both did. And when we get those criticisms, and I got them too, it stings and hurts. But then you can take a step back and go, wait a minute, I'm a brand new teacher. Yes, I'm a 40-year-old adult with lots of life experience and successes behind me. But right now I'm a brand new teacher. Who the hell do I think I am that I can't be criticized or that I'm doing a perfect job? That's insane. And
True.
then, for me, that I was able to, quickly remind myself and be humble and say, I'm new here. I need to be learning. I need to be open and in order to do your best at something new, you've got to establish that sort of humble baseline. Yes, I've had the training. Yes, I've had a life. I'm a high functioning individual. I can do stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know this job. I don't have the experiences and the years of teaching in a classroom that all these colleagues do. Very quickly, my experience was at that place, moving from feeling intimidated by the colleagues who have all this experience and knowledge of student life and all that stuff, making a quick shift to learning from them. And the minute I did that, I felt that I was discovering my own success. I was finding my own way, but also getting the support and the knowledge from my colleagues. I'm not trying to say that I entered that job feeling obnoxious and arrogant and I'm the new superstar on the campus. That was not my way at all. I just didn't realize how much there was to learn initially. So initially I came into it quite confident, like, yeah, I know about English. I just went through a teacher training program, so I'm pretty sure I can manage my classroom fine. I'm ready to go. To the first few substitute lessons I taught were like, okay, this is what it is. This is not going to be easy.
And that's the other thing too. I don't mean to interrupt because we've talked about this a million times. No, it isn't easy, but the profession has this reputation for being something you can just get into. Hey, I'm going to go teach in Japan for a year with no qualifications. And that probably was the case. It's got this sort of, I guess it's not a real teaching position is what I discovered getting into it. And I take it very seriously. It's a life-changing, transformative skill that people need to acquire in order to change their lives. So you play a huge role in the lives of individuals who are trying to communicate better and learn English. So yeah, it isn't easy. If you take it seriously, it's a truly rewarding profession that requires 100% dedication.
Yeah. It really does. It demands a lot of you.
Yeah.
It's not just this whimsical thing you can do after university and travel the world. You don't need qualifications or training because you're a native speaker. So obviously you're perfect English teacher.
Yeah. Okay. Well, try explaining why we say I have had many experiences in my life. Why do we say have had? Because students are going to ask you that. What is that? And then that moment comes, you're like, oh my God, why do we say that? I don't know.
And not only being able to explain why we do that, but getting your student to adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Teaching isn't just explaining, because we're teaching them a skill they have to be able to use and produce. So even if you can explain a grammar point, can you get the student to use it effectively?
Exactly.
Like that's a whole other dimension. Can you produce classroom activities and exercises and training that gets them where they need to be?
Yeah.
Right? It's not like a academic lecture in university where
No.
you just explain some topic that you're an expert on.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to develop a skill in someone else. That's a whole other dimension of the teaching, the classroom work, the management of a classroom.
Absolutely. It's
Those things
training.
are
It's
yeah,
practice.
those are professional techniques that have to
Mm-hmm.
be learned. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it's an undervalued profession, as we've
We've many times. And I'm sure that we will be talking about that a lot more also in the future.
and I suppose that answers a question too for me about why I do this.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked at the language school, as great as it was, the one thing that I grew, I don't know what the right word isn't suspicious, but the one element that I grew to resent was this. I worked very hard there because I was a new teacher and I wanted to be great at what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much to learn. So I worked very hard. I worked extremely hard. I was the first one in our building every day, and many times the last one to leave. I spent lots of evenings with students who wanted extra help, free of charge, no extra pay. I worked very hard. I had successes. Students valued my teaching. They would ask to be transferred into my classes. They would make speeches praising me at graduation, which always embarrassed the hell out of me. So I enjoyed this sort of unusual success there.
Yeah. I was very proud of you. It was so wonderful. Yeah.
I do believe some people resented that because before we had worked there had been a movement to unionize the company, the profession, and the business. And at some point, it didn't succeed. But the management offered a few union-esque elements, such as a wage scale based on seniority. And I think my criticism of the environment there, and I'm not against unions for the most part, but there was a kind of feeling that I got from some colleagues after a while that I was doing too much. And it was sort of, maybe in a union environment, everything is standardized. And if you're paid to work 8 hours, you work 8 hours, not 9. And anyone that goes above that, there's the risk of that becoming a new standard that's expected of everyone else. So they tend to resent the nail that sticks out. And I definitely stuck out in some ways. And so I started to feel a little resent from my colleagues. And it was just a feeling, but I was sensitive to it. And I also started to realize, okay, I'm having my success based on my effort. But being a fairly new member of the team, I'm not earning any more money than the senior members. Didn't put in the effort that I did. And so I thought at some point, I either have to stop working the way I do, which I didn't want to do because that's just what I enjoyed. That was my standard of professionalism. Or I've got to go somewhere and become self-employed so that there is no ceiling on my earnings, and that I'm entirely responsible for my earnings, and no one's going to resent me if I work hard and do well. So I started making plans even before the pandemic to move to online teaching, and started learning Zoom, started building
the website.
Yeah, building the website, all
I
that.
remember that.
Eventually getting into video productions.
Yeah.
And all of that helped me make the move when the pandemic happened. It made the decision very easy not to return to the school. So
Mhm.
my retirement job plan became more immediate.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I like to work on my own is that I'm responsible for my own successes. There's no limit to it.
Mm-hmm.
The limit is, there are some, what's the word? Like, there are some ceilings that are established by outside forces, the market, competition, etc. My own
competition. Yeah.
I'm getting older. I can't, work 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also to free up time in my life that I used to give to commuting or other activities and spend that on my own interests, personal interests, like my own writing, for example. So those are the reasons why I chose to do it and to keep doing it, because every time it gets hard and we start commiserating how hard this is, I remind myself when I worked at that school, I used to commute for 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
On crowded subway, crowded SkyTrain and buses.
Yeah.
I don't need to go back to that.
No, there is something to be said about the commute being across the hall or up the stairs. That's pretty sweet. I just had to walk up the stairs. Yeah.
Stairs we had to walk back at the language.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I do appreciate the stairs. I mean, it's nice because there is a lot of sitting involved. I mean, once you get involved in all the technical stuff, before you know it, it's 3:00 and you started at 9. That's a good sign in terms of, you're in the zone and you're in the flow working. But your health can be something to, that gets neglected a little bit. So that's another thing, right? Exercise, hydration. I mean, you could be in front of this thing, and I have many, 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 many days been in front of this thing for hours and then realizing I haven't actually stood up for 6 hours.
Whereas before we'd be on our feet 8 hours a day up and
Loved that. Loved standing in front of the whiteboard. I mean, that's another thing. I have a whiteboard. You have a whiteboard. I rarely use my whiteboard in class. I'm always using a Google Doc or something. So I miss standing.
That's a huge adjustment,
Yeah.
especially with us being in our middle ages. How have you adjusted? How have you made that adjustment so that you're not harming your health? Because a lot of this is butts in chairs.
Yeah.
And that's a big change from the way we used to work.
Yeah.
What sort of adjustments have you done?
I walk every day. So I walk for at least an hour. I like to get the 10,000 steps, which takes about an hour and a half to get that. And not consistently, but, yoga. So I used to do yoga every day. Now I don't know what's happened. I do like maybe once or twice a week, but I definitely make sure that I get some kind of exercise every day. And that's usually early in the morning, because by the time the afternoon comes, I lose all motivation to do it, or I get into I know myself. You have to know yourself. I know myself. Once I get into something, I'm in it, and I'm not going to feel like going for a walk at 5 p.m. or doing yoga at 7. So mornings are great for me.
How does your diet compare to when you worked in a school environment?
When I was working at school, I brought my lunch every day, like a salad and protein, and walked home. And so here I probably forget to eat sometimes because I'm working, and end up eating a little bit more in the evenings than I used to. So, yeah, but it hasn't affected it too badly. I'm quite aware of, the reason why I eat so much in the evening, not so much, but so well, is because my husband is a chef. So he brings home the food and I can't not. He's so talented. It's delicious food. That's, oh, the chef husband, the dinners and the desserts are, irresistible. And so what? Life is short. I'm going to eat it.
But it is a big change, right? Because we're not going to burn the sort of automatic calories that we would.
Yes.
Calories just leave your body when you're standing and walking upstairs in a class all day long. You're not even aware how much you're burning off.
Yeah. Yeah. So expect, if you're going to get into this online profession, expect to gain a pound or two.
It's something to consider. You're going to have to make some adjustments, unless you're in your 20s and nothing affects you. But
that's another thing. You should do an episode of women teachers online in their mid 40s and 50s, because menopause is another thing that comes into play as well. So that would be a good topic one day.
Yeah, I'd be curious to learn how that affects your daily work, how it affects your online presence, and
this kind of middle-aged work transition, career transition into the online world, whether you're a teacher or whatever you're doing, working online. It's a new model, particularly for our generation. 80s, 90s, came of age in the 80s and 90s and had a particular way of interacting with the world, learning about new technology. I think we're the generation that really had to, the exponential rate. Yeah. So that in tandem with changing work ethics. So having, our expectations are different. We've talked about this too. So that's so much to look forward to in terms of conversations related to that. Generational differences and similarities.
Yeah, that's a really good topic, because both you and I are examples of, probably from what I've learned in the psychology literature, the best solution to a midlife crisis, the so-called midlife crisis, where you reach a point in your life where you've achieved something. Maybe some people have achieved all their goals by their 40s or something. And you look back and start realizing you're halfway through your life and the best years are now behind you. That can trigger a lot of questioning in your life. But from what I've learned about that topic, because I went through that moment, the solution is to recommit yourself to new goals.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling the loss of the old ones and the things you can't do anymore, recommit yourself to new goals. And changing your profession, as we both did, is a huge way to do that. It's for me, it was the best way to deal with my midpoint moment of feeling a little bit like, okay, I've done this for 25 years. I'm no longer happy with it, but I no longer know who I am or what I can do. And returning to things that were childhood passions, video making, writing, all those things. Recommitting yourself to new goals propels you forward instead of thinking backward. So you and I are both examples of how to manage that so-called midlife crisis, which I'm not sure how prevalent or strong that is for women, but for men, it's a real thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, for humans in general, I think when you say the best years behind you, I think that's a kind of a expression that we're that have been instilled in us, conditioned. And it's not necessarily true, because we have such an obsession with youth culture and youth. But youth is not, physically it transitions. We transition out of youth, but it's always in our mind. And to maintain that youthfulness is always learning. And I think that vitality and that the ability to change your mindset, the ability to keep going as an entrepreneur is because of that continual learning. It is essential in keeping keeping yourself, because we always feel like we're 20 inside, right? Even my parents who are approaching their 80s, I feel like I'm 30. That's a youthful mind. We always have it, but it can get a little stagnant if you stay doing something and then get kind of stuck in, this is the way it's done, which turns into a kind of a lack of ability to have any empathy for others or a willingness to learn new ideas about the culture. I feel like I'm going in many different directions, but I mean, culture is constantly changing, as we know, with Black Lives Matter, with reconciliation, with gender, LGBTQ issues. These are really important issues to people, to us as human beings. And it's important that we are open, right, to these new concepts and new insights on what it means to be a human being. And then language follows, right? So culture changes and then the language kind of evolves after that. So there's another topic in the future, pronouns, the resistance to and the welcoming of, and why. So yeah.
Well said. I read something interesting talking about this aging concept. I read something recently that really it was really striking. And I'm just going to paraphrase, but it was saying that in the first half of your life, you identify with your body.
Mm.
You are your body.
Yes.
You are your body in terms of what it looks like, in terms of what you can do physically. And you think of yourself as a body. In the last half of your life, the second half of your life, as your body falls off, you identify with yourself as a consciousness, the things you know, the memories you have. Because when you're young, you have no memories.
Mm-hmm.
You're always thinking about now and tomorrow.
And the future, yeah.
After you pass your midpoint, you identify with yourself as a consciousness. There's no point in identifying yourself as a body. It's going away. And you shift, the healthy person shifts towards identifying as a consciousness, a collection of memories, ideas, beliefs, opinions, intellectual goals, pursuit of knowledge, learning again. All of that stuff is the healthy way to think of yourself and move away from identifying yourself as a body. Because in my case, I really struggle with the use of my legs. Even working at the language school, injuries, arthritis started catching up with me and reminding me with every step what I can no longer do physically. And that propelled me to start thinking of myself in different ways, thinking of myself as a being, a conscious being whose value depends on what I think and what I know, not what I look like or what I can do physically. And if you don't make that shift, then you're stuck looking back, thinking all the things you used to be able to do and no longer can. And that's the dead end.
Yeah.
And, or worse, trying to recapture them. I'm 45 years old. I'm going to join a teenage basketball league where I'm going to dye my hair funky and go chase teenage girls.
Oh boy. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But shifting towards thinking of yourself as a consciousness that has value. That's a good way to think about moving into online teaching, because quite literally, people only see you as a head.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Even in my live show on Fridays, my camera only sees the whiteboard, which is me from the belt up. So I'm half a body.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter though, because it's my knowledge that has value to the viewers. It's my knowledge and my compassion for them, my interest in them, my empathy for them, my interest in their culture and their goals. All of that consciousness is what they pay for.
Yeah.
So I think if you make the change to online teaching, especially in your middle age, I don't recommend it really for young people necessarily. They should be out in the world being a body.
Yeah.
But if you do make that change, think of yourself in terms of that. Think of yourself as a consciousness worth sharing.
That's a wonderful, that's a wonderful way of putting it.
I just read that the other day and I thought, well, that's really striking.
Where did you read it?
I can't remember now. Just one of those things that you at any number of websites or memes. Excuse me, but it resonated with me. Excuse me.
Yeah.
It really it really put things in a really clear light.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's great.
Not that I want to completely abandon my body, but I think of my body now as a vehicle for my consciousness.
Yeah. And we still keep our bodies fit. I mean, it's really important. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but now I think of my body not as what makes me money. My body is just a vehicle for the consciousness that it can. And I'm married, so it's no longer super important how I appear to someone.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Out there selling yourself and
Yeah.
It kind of liberates you as a consciousness. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and all topics to explore, I think, going forward. I'm excited about what we're going to discuss and who we're going to have with us. Former colleagues, people from each of our niches. I'm excited to invite some actors on and a drag queen or two, perhaps, to talk to, which would be great. And for you?
Well, I've been fortunate to connect with lots of people in the writing world online.
Yeah.
Writers tend to feel alone because that's the nature of what you do. And they, like English teachers, and some of them are both, can really benefit from at least periodic communing with others, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's something that I would want to address to our viewers or listeners. One of the reasons that this staff meeting that you and I have maintained for the last 3 years has been so valuable for me is I'm essentially an introvert, a very strong introvert. I withdraw very easily from social things, and I'm very comfortable working alone for long periods of time. Yet, despite that, being completely isolated and only seeing my wife for the last 3 years also showed me that introversion is not 100% zero-sum deal. You still need contact with people. They need to be maybe close friends of yours rather than going to a big party or gathering.
Yeah.
But without that periodic social interaction, bad things can happen. You get too far up in your head.
Yeah. And our meetings were really, not to, the hyperbole here, but it's with lifesavers. Those meetings were lifesavers. The life of our missions was, in jeopardy some days. You feel like you're swimming, you're drowning, and you don't know why you're doing this anymore. And I am sure that there are other teachers out there who would love to come to the staff meeting and get some support. Get a little...
By saying that, mentioning whichever platform this podcast ends up on, please say hello in the comments.
Oh, yeah.
Self. maybe mention something about your experiences. And
Yeah.
as we move this podcast into live formats,
Yeah.
please join us and interact.
And did anything we say resonate with you? And maybe we can continue the conversation based on something that we mentioned. That would be great.
Yeah. And join us at the next staff meeting.
Yeah. Next staff meeting. We'll put the agenda. Well, we don't have an agenda, but the time and place will be posted for the next interesting conversation that we always end up having at the staff meeting.
Well, Andrea, as always, thank you for
the
staff meeting and
yeah,
about all our stuff. I feel 10x more supported and empowered today, and I'm ready to go and meet my clients. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Also, I feel invigorated, and I'm ready to do my speaking review for my student that I'm meeting soon, and giving her some really inspired feedback.
That's awesome.
All right. See you next time, Paul. Okay. Bye.